Okay, so today I'll do another one of these random sessions where I just look through YouTube videos, although the last time I tried to do it, I didn't actually do anything because I just was kind of talking about different topics, but that's kind of what it's meant to be. But I'll try to watch to sort of give a reaction to it, even if it's indirect. Like, for example, if you're able to basically do it in such a way that, you know, you're able to appreciate that, what do you call it? I'm fucking losing my train of thought. You're basically able to watch something, and I'm not directly reacting to it, and I'm not even, I'll say what it is, or I'll kind of let you guess what it is, but even beyond that, you're able to, it'll just give me ideas of stuff to talk about in general, so I'm more focused on the take or the subject than I am on the specific of the video itself. So the whole point is I always see these like podcasts. I don't even know why they're in my recommended, to be honest, but I always see like these podcast clips like, oh, OnlyFans girls talking to some alpha Chad giga male, whatever, and it's like, it's not very insightful usually, and it usually has some very broad take that triggers me just on the basic level, like women are blank, men are blank, like those don't really work as claims because it doesn't matter what the claim is. Almost nothing is going to apply to them, especially when it's something idiosyncratic. In fact, I saw something like a guy wearing high heels, and I understand, like, you don't have to make a spectacle out of it and make a video out of it, and it could be some high-ranking official. I get all that. But just on the base level, let's analyze that, this sort of outrage, right? So I'm sort of in an objective middle ground with this position. Like, I'm not anti-anything or pro-anything. I'm just looking at this like a biological male wears high heels or stilettos, right? Whatever. Nothing about stilettos or high heels would be qualified to say that, okay, this is, what does it have to do with being a woman? I can explain it, but I would love to hear people's rebuttals. Why shouldn't a man be able to wear those? And so you look back historically, men have worn things like that, right, in colonial times, whatever, and also, you know, they would wear wigs, so all these things kind of change over time. It wasn't necessarily a high heel stiletto type of thing, but it was basically heels that would help you be taller. So it's based on two things. One is based on height. So on average, women are shorter than men, historically, biologically, whatever. Although that's a very broad claim to make, but overall, in terms of the general population, yes, on an average level. And so on an average level, that's why society has normalized, okay, it's more common for women to wear those kind of things because of the simple fact that you have, on average they're shorter, and so it's a height issue, not a gender issue. But now we're so caught up in that. This is what I don't agree with. It's like you're just stuck up on something that you're used to and that you don't understand even why. There's no rational reason that you could articulate. A high heel is just a heel. It's just footwear. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. The only thing it could potentially have to do with gender, again, is like, if it's a bra, I can understand. There's a certain body part assumption for, okay, you expect to have bigger breasts because you're a woman, and even that's sort of malleable a bit because, there's man boobs, but generally speaking, that at least I can understand the objection to. But if somebody really wants to wear a bra, even if they don't have breasts, more power to them, whatever. But with this, everybody has feet. Everybody can be short, assuming that's what you're trying to overcompensate for. So anybody could wear them. I don't see on any objective level, right? So my whole position is you need a good reason to restrict somebody. I'm not telling anybody they should wear them. I'm not telling anybody they shouldn't wear them. But there's this outrage on that video site comments. This is where one side sort of feeds into the other and gives it. It's one thing, okay, you say, biology is one thing, certainly sports, if they're segregated by gender, you shouldn't be able to do that, where you can identify as a different gender and play in the other gender's league, right? My solution to that is unisex sports, so then it doesn't matter what gender you are, just the best players play, and that's it, right? That might pose certain problems, but ultimately that's what you're going to get anyway if you try to do it this way. So I just object to the inconsistency of the criteria that you would call it women's sports, you would call it men's sports, but then you would allow this sort of malleable definition of gender while you're the one as the sport who's posing that definition. I didn't say segregate gender, sports by gender. I never said to do that. In fact, I specifically said many, many years back that was called sort of a sexist take, which I always hold on to that as a hilarious thing. At first it was sexist against women to say that there should be unisex sports. Now it's transphobic to say, that there shouldn't be, or that there should be, or whatever, right? Like, it's transphobic if you say, well, why not just have a league for everyone, right? Which of course trans people could partake in. but then you say, oh, they should be able to play in either one that they want or identify with. But then the flip side of that is like, oh, it's anti-women to say that because then it wouldn't be fair to them. But now it's not anti-women to say that a biological male could do that. So in that context, at least it's relevant. But this is one that you could really answer. High heels are simply a piece of clothing. High heels have to do with height, right? As the name would suggest. They make you higher, they make you taller, right? And so therefore, what possible reason, what possible overlap do high heels have with biological females compared to biological males? What about them makes it so that, you both have feet as long as they fit you, as long as they're comfortable? Like, it's hard for me to argue that. I can't. I cannot come up with a logical basis. Now, that doesn't mean I do it or I would want to do it or that I'm encouraging anybody to do it, but it's more like I can't. If you're in favor of just this objective logical basis, I need a good reason to tell somebody not to do something, right? Other than just, so like I can say, okay, don't wear a bra unless you have breasts. But if you really want to, it's not hurting anybody. It might be a waste of your money and, seem a little strange, right? If you don't have breasts, whatever. Some women have small, you can wear appropriate size, whatever. But like some women have small breasts, flat chested. So it's such a subjective thing. But this is where people really lose sight of it. They are insisting upon antiquated notions of society that have nothing to do with actual biological gender. What part of being a biological male says you can't wear high heels? Presumably if you're tall, like you're 6 feet tall, now it feels kind of redundant, but actually I know people who do that. In fact, there was this girl I went out with who she was already over 6 feet tall, and then she wore heels on top of that. Not really high heels, but like, shoes with a bit of height to them. And I found that kind of attractive because it's like, she already knows, she had like this really alpha disposition overall. Like, she knows that she's taller than me and everybody else anyway, right, on average, but she wants to be even taller than that and stand out even more. Like, that's a pretty, you're sort of laying it on a bit thick, but I like that. So I can see the appeal in that context. But you know what it almost is it's an insecurity. Like, you're as a guy, you're like, oh, I'm attracted to women and their clothing or whatever, right? You associate it with them, even though, again, clothing is just clothing. There's nothing, when a baby comes out of the womb, it's like, oh, you're only allowed to wear this kind of clothing. Where does it say that in biology? What possible way could you use to justify that? And then beyond that, you have the simple ability to, look at it in the context of, it's an insecurity, like, oh, you find that attractive on a woman, so now you don't want to see men wear it because that's kind of giving you mixed signals. But I disagree with that because it has nothing to do with that, right? It's not the clothing that's attractive, it's the person underneath it that's attractive who is wearing it. So I disagree with all these stereotypes. All these things, again, what it shows you is actually a willful sexualization of women that is taken as a baseline. Like, oh, lipstick and nail polish and heels and certain kinds of clothing. Why are those associated with women necessarily, right? They're all things that will be along the lines of being sexualized, which subjectively, on average, you can say, yes, that's something that, women are considered more attractive physically than men, on average, to the opposite sex, right? You can make all those claims, but that's all it's predicated on, then. It's just a preferential sexualization. How about we sexualize neither and say nobody needs to do that, and it's just minimalistic, or anybody can do that? It's very hard to restrict it. It's hard for me to come up with an answer. Again, I'm being objective. I don't care. I don't have a horse in the race. None of this applies to me. I'm minimalistic anyway, so I don't really adhere to a lot of things that even men would stereotypically have. But for example, men can wear boots as a height consideration, right? So it's not that far along from that. So yeah, that's where I would have a hard time making an argument. This is what I often would used to do too. I would try to come up with devil's advocate arguments. Like, well, if I was trying to argue against it, what would I say? And I can't come up with one, right? The only thing is you're insisting upon some archaic social structure that says men have to wear certain kind of things and women have to wear certain kind of things. For what reason, I don't know, right? I can't explain the exact reason from an inherent base perspective, right? This is one of those, like, people wouldn't give a reason, but they'd just be outraged and disgusted and emotional about it. Like, oh, that's so horrible. How could anybody possibly do that? They won't even know why themselves that they're so disgusted by it. It's a piece of clothing, it's a piece of shoe wear that has to do with height, right? That makes a person taller. So what does that have to do with anything at all? And I guess it's part of the stimuli acme obsession with sex that, like, okay, you might find it attractive on a woman or you're used to seeing it on women, so therefore you insist upon that, even though not everything has to be about that. It's just you're wearing it because you like to, it's comfortable, you like how it looks, it makes you taller. So It doesn't have to be. In fact, if anything, that's the whole point. It doesn't have to be this malleable thing between gender, because now you realize that, what you wear as clothing has nothing to do with gender. Anybody can wear any piece of clothing. And so now you realize that people wouldn't be, a biological male wouldn't be so inclined to try to identify as a female, because now you're accepting the fact that biological men can wear anything that they want. So now they're still a biological male, but they happen to be wearing a piece of clothing that they are physically capable of wearing. Again, assuming it fits, assuming size consideration, things like that, is all, that's all variable. But I'm saying there is a certain disconnect there that I see this insistence upon, right? I'm a minimalist, so there's a lot of things that people do anyway. Like, I tell that story. One of my friends would never wear makeup, and she would work, and we worked in the same place. We would work in the same professional environment, and you were expected to do things like that, but she just didn't do it. And she was so good at her job, and, everybody liked her to the point where you couldn't really question her, so nobody said anything. So if anybody else didn't wear makeup, they, it might be brought up, but she could just get away with doing it. So what I'm saying is, I don't necessarily care about things like that, right? You don't need to wear makeup. You don't need to wear fancy clothes. You don't need anything, but you can do it if you want, and it's not actually a gender thing. That's what I think people don't get. Biological gender says one thing. It says that, okay, on average, maybe you're a little taller. On average, maybe men have physical advantages, athletic advantages. On average, maybe women are considered more physically attractive. On average, maybe, you're able to reproduce. You're able to make someone pregnant if you're a male. You're able to become pregnant if you're a female, right? So on average, those are the expectations. Nowhere does it say, certain pieces of clothing. Even if you want to say, these things are made for them, right? Again, I'm struggling to figure it out. Certain things have to do with the form, right? Like, a dress will reveal certain parts of your body that are considered, again, sexualization of women, are considered okay to reveal as a woman or desirable to reveal. Whereas with men, if only you could see it from the other perspective, like, so a woman wears a suit and a tie and very conservative, dress clothing. Now all of a sudden, is that not acceptable? Can women not wear a t-shirt and shorts and sneakers and whatever, like just sweatpants and just other things? Like what would be something in the other direction, like something stereotypical for a man to wear that a woman typically wouldn't, right? There's kind of less stuff like that. A woman just wears like a casual t-shirt and shorts, right, that might be more associated with men, but that's not a big deal, right? Like if a girlfriend wears a boyfriend's shirt, it might be a little big for them, but other than that, there's no such stereotype. But if the guy wears some of the women's clothing, now all of a sudden everyone loses their minds, like, you can't do that, right? That is a very strange standard to have. So there's a certain insecurity that this shows that you're not really fighting against anything. This is why it emboldens the other side, right? And you create this false duality where you're unduly pressuring something, and then people feel, we got to take pride and we're victims and this and that. None of that would be necessary. You're creating it from one side to the other. So what I don't like is the media sort of co-opting these things. The corporate-owned media will say, it'll co-opt something to the extent that you're able to keep pushing it in your face all the time. So that I disagree with. But the way to solve it is a more more of a sort of base neutrality that you can have, where you only criticize things that actually have a harm in them. So, for example, the men's and women's bathroom, that could be a fair point, right? I would say the same thing. Just make a unisex bathroom, and that solves the problem. Like with unisex sports, the only problem with that is, if something happens, then all of a sudden you'll say, but what's weird about that is, what if a woman assaults another woman in the bathroom, right? For maybe she's into women, maybe that's the sexual motivation or whatever. Again, assuming anybody couldn't just do that anywhere anyway, but you know what I mean? That's the main fear, that like, a man would assault a woman in the bathroom or something, or like spy on them. It makes them, feel uncomfortable. So the point being that that's what it seeks to subvert. So at least that you have a legitimate reason to say, okay, let's keep them separate because people feel uncomfortable. But what they don't get there either is, you could be gay, you could be into the other sex, and you wouldn't know that. So they could be perving on you as well, if you're able to, if you're able to do it in such a way that, you know what I mean, like a gay woman assaults or spies on another gay woman in an environment that is like that. So, you know what I mean? So, again, it's a societal assumption that the majority of people are straight and they operate under the same exact mindset. So, under that criteria, you know what I mean? Like, you can't stop people from being gay, so you would never know that. You can't stop people from being, a gay man in the same context. So, but again, at least there's some basis to it. You're not just saying arbitrarily, oh, we have to separate bathrooms by that. It creates a certain comfort level that, like, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. Again, even though there are flaws with that too, I can understand that generally. Or like every bathroom is a family bathroom, so parents with their kids come in there, like, you know what I mean. There are those things already. Family restroom, so everybody can go in there, man, woman, child. So that could be how bathrooms are treated, not like this really scary place that you have to do that, but where you have to separate it so aggressively. So that's an interesting one, I think, bathroom and sports. But see, sports is a different issue. Sports isn't like, oh, it's an anti-this or anti-that. It's a very clear basis. If the sport has in the name or in the history and the criteria, like, for example, the NBA did have a woman who was drafted, but then she never actually played. So that implies that the NBA was willing to have women in it, right? I don't know if the WNBA existed or really had taken off at that point, but, I mean, I guess it still hasn't taken off, wink, wink, but, Caitlin Clark, all this hype, but here's the point, is that, unless you say it clearly, like, okay, it's no longer women's, and you don't see it happen in the other direction, so it shows a clear incentive, right? Let's assume that women's sports on average are weaker than men's and less competitive, right? Let's assume that men have certain physical advantages, at least at the highest level. So if you assume those things, now there's a clear incentive, right? There'll be a biological male who identifies as a female and plays in a women's sport and benefits from that as a result. Now, there's no question that they're still a good athlete, but it raises questions. Now it's no longer women's sports, and so it's one of two things. Women have gotten special treatment for all these years, and now meritocracy comes to deliver karma. In other words, all these female athletes who weren't as good as men got all this attention and credit in their own league that they didn't deserve because men were always better. So let's stop giving them attention and just let men, be better, objectively better at what they're doing, and therefore get all the credit. So in other words, that creates unisex sports where there will still be women in them, but they just wouldn't be as good, or they wouldn't be as many, right? That would be the assumption from one perspective. The other perspective would be, again, how many biological females do you see identifying as men to play in men's sports? It may have happened, but it's much less common, and even when they do, they're not breaking all their records. There's all this Leah Thomas and this and that. Now what you have is, okay, you have a situation where there's a clear advantage. Identifying as a female isn't just something that's your identity, which I can respect, but it's also something that gave you a clear objective advantage and allowed you to do things that you wouldn't have been able to do if you hadn't done that, right? That's the point. So it's actually not a fault of any individual there, it's a fault of the sports league. You defined it as women's swimming or women's basketball, WNBA with women in the name. You defined it that way. So now you have to make a decision. Just say that it's no longer the WNBA, it's just a unisex league that anybody can compete in. That's perfectly fine within the realm of meritocracy. That might hurt women's sports and female athletes a lot, but you know what I mean? That's what's going to happen anyway. So you have to have a clear definition of what the league is about. And so if you change the definition, then nobody can be upset, but you keep it halfway. You benefit from a league that's going to be mostly women, and that has women in the name, and that has the history of being about women and all that. You have that as basically the premise, right? You create that premise and expectation. Now somebody comes in and identifies as a woman who's a biological male, whatever, and now you have a situation where it's confusing because you have two conflicting criteria. So by that logic, why couldn't you just do that? So if I was a biological male who identifies as a biological male, but I still want to play in that league, oh no, you can't do that. On what criteria can't I do that? Oh, that's not fair to women. So you're kind of outing yourself like, oh, so see, that's one instance where biology at least actually matters, whereas in a lot of these other contexts it doesn't, right? Like, oh, you're supposed to do this, or you can't do this, or, those are just subjective, again, archaic standards of society that people just insist upon because they're just familiar, right? It's hard to really argue what it's hard to argue what actually the reasoning behind it is. And so in that sense, yes, you're emboldening this other side, because you're saying, well, we are really victimizing them for no reason. We just don't want people to wear high heels just because, right? It's where you become, again, I'll stop short of doing that, where I might agree, like, the sports thing is an issue, the bathroom thing can be an issue, right? These things we can agree on because there's at least a functional, logical basis, and again, a consistency that you're seeking. But now people take it too far, like, oh, you can't wear certain types of clothing, you can't wear lipstick, you can't wear makeup, you can't wear nail polish. Why? Because society is obsessed with sex and obsessed with sexualizing women, so it's okay for women to do those things that make them presumably more attractive and accentuate their attractiveness. But men aren't considered physically attractive as much or in that way, so therefore you're not allowed to do that. But what if it's not about sexualization? What if not everything is about sex? What if it's just about appearance? What if it's just about preference of clothing? What you want to wear? So I don't see what it's based on. And again, I would love to ask one of these people, one of these podcast Peter clowns, like, what is the basis? Why can't you do it? What is the biological basis? Like, let me have a doctor or a biologist explain to me. Yeah, you see, when a female is born, there's this certain thing about their foot that has like this natural connection to a high heel shape. So therefore, a biological male is not physically capable of wearing a high heel because it just doesn't work. You need this special protrusion, whatever, that only women have, right? You would have to explain it from that basis. Otherwise, it's like, oh, anybody can wear that. Anybody can wear anything, right? Just different sizes. And it's not fair to really bring that up because, some women are going to have big feet. Some women are going to have small feet. It's not like, oh, well, you can't wear high heels because none of them are going to fit you. But, this is where society sort of has lost its way in the modern era, that our technology has come so far, but you're insisting upon these things that serve no purpose. It would be just the ultimate question. Just give a simple reason, why can't you do it, right? And what is the basis? And it would be impossible. I'm completely at a loss. I keep trying to think of one, but I can't do it. The functional basis of a bra would at least be a basis to operate under, right? You don't wear a bra if you're a man because you don't have breasts that are big enough to, require it. But, even if you did, it's not the end of the world. But at least I can see a basis there. Most of these other things I don't see, right? And you might say, oh, well, like a dress. A man can wear a dress because, oh, no, you don't want to be showing all this kind of stuff. But the problem with it is, why should women be showing that too? Then, because society sexualizes women, and that's a good thing. Like, I'm not encouraging sexualization of men, right? But I'm saying, how can you take one for granted and not the other? Just because on an average, broad level, I'm not even saying it's sexist against women. It's just weird, right? Why can we just openly do that with one sex but not the other? Or why not do it with neither then and just say, you can do whatever you want, but it's very strange, right? There are all these standards that are just like taken for granted, that I'm not even saying they're right or wrong, but they're just taken for granted blindly, where there's no guaranteed value to them. So now maybe I should watch some videos, but no, like this OnlyFans thing, it's a two-way street, I've said this one like 1,000 times, and don't blame the women for doing it. Like really, if I came to you and said, as a woman, you can just post a couple pictures and videos and whatever stuff online, and you can make as much as you make from your job from it, or you can make more, you can potentially make millions, and all you have to do is put pictures and stuff and interact with people a little bit, right? Why wouldn't people do that? It's hard to argue not to, right? But there'll be all this sort of phony moralizing. It's like, I'm not encouraging people to do it, but if you can make that much money and that's all you have to do, at least in the past you would have like a physical basis, like, oh, you have to go out and prostitute on the street and this and that, and you can get all kind of diseases, and at least there's more risk involved. Now it's like you just sit in your home and you just post a couple pictures of your feet or whatever other things, and now you get money for it. Like, how are you really going to argue that somebody isn't going to want to do that? Right, it's just so convenient. There's no physical interaction. There's no in-person contact. Everything is perfectly, convenient. And so on the flip side, it's like, I'm not moralizing. It's just, it's something that people are going to do because it's easy enough to do and it's, profitable enough. And so blame the people on the other side who are paying for it. It's a supply and demand issue, right? if OnlyFans went offline tomorrow, people would just find other ways to seek out the same thing. So I don't see how we can do that. We condemn these OnlyFans girls. They're for the streets, and they're whatever. They're sluts, this and that. Okay, but also, what about the people who are buying it and paying for it, and enabling them, and they're providing a service, and people are paying for the service. So the real way to solve it is stop seeking out that service, or the majority of people would not be doing that. Then they wouldn't be doing it either. So they're not just doing it, right? They're not just saying, I feel like posting nude pictures of myself online for no reason at all, right? People are offering them money, they're getting paid for it, it's a whole business model, right? So it's a two-way street. So I'm not going to condemn one without condemning the other. The fact that you want that is just as bad as the fact that they're doing it, assuming it's bad at all. It's just a natural human tendency that we've had through our history. People have always had lustful, sexual interests, desires, fantasies. And so therefore, and it's not just OnlyFans, it just became ubiquitous with it. There's probably plenty of other sites before, after, during, there'll be other ways to do it. It's just more successful at it, more convenient at it. So it's hard for me to argue that, it doesn't matter, because, yes, you might lose your job because of it, but even that's improper. How do they even know? And even if they do, what you do in your so it was okay to be a stripper, right, but it's not okay to do OnlyFans just because it's more out there and whatever. And again, at no point when I'm having these discussions am I advocating for it. I've never used something like that, so I wouldn't care, right? I would never be the user. Thereby, if everybody was like me, it wouldn't exist, because nobody would be making money from it. So therefore, what's the problem, right? So that would be the real solution. But instead, let's shame these OnlyFans girls for making money in a way that's relatively easy for them to do, that people are willing to pay them for. There's so many elements of the process that you're not acknowledging are, you know what I mean? It's too tempting, and it doesn't even require them to physically do anything. So you're condemning it on such an archaic notion, it used to be condemned because you might get diseases from it, or it used to be condemned because you might get pregnant from it, or all those kind of things, right? In person, or somebody might take advantage of the situation and mistreat you and blah, blah, blah. All those kind of things are not even present here, right? You're doing it on your terms, you're posting pictures, videos. So now what is the risk factor? Just self-respect, and you're losing respect for yourself and integrity, assuming that integrity and respect comes from, being at discomfort with your own physical body. It's suppose it's a nudist colony, it's not that big of a deal. Sex isn't the end-all, be-all. So it's that archaic notion of obsession with sex that we still haven't evolved beyond that as a society, that, it's not that big of a deal. Sex isn't everything. You could just walk around naked, and there you go. That's a nudist colony, objective society that it'll take us 1,000 years to get there. But what you have beyond that is just all those risk factors don't come with it. So now our technology has advanced to the level where all the previous reasons why something was condemned is no longer condemned. For example, I'll give you an example. Let's say we come up with this special little thing, right? We have a pill that we can all take, and no side effects, it's perfectly fine, and it makes us immune from STDs and everything else negative that can come with sex. It makes us immune from getting pregnant unless we want to. We can flip a little switch and just, whatever. Right, so there's no side effects, no downside. You can't get STDs, you can't get pregnant, everything is perfectly fine. Right, unless you want to get pregnant, you still can't. So the point is, now all the downsides to do with being promiscuous and sleeping around are gone. Now it would be a lot harder to condemn, because it's people just enjoy it, it's all consensual, they want to have fun, open relationships. How can you condemn it now? Right, so you'll realize the basis historically why things were condemned is often because of a functional basis. Okay, people might get STDs, or people, there would be negative effects. It'll hurt a family system in society. But, again, that's the functional basis. So if you solve all those things, then what's the problem, right? And oftentimes technology will do that, where, oftentimes technology will do that. So if we get technology that allows us to negate some prior functional negative process, now all of a sudden you will do it. And the reason why you'll do it is because of the simple fact that what? like for example, let's just think about anything that's condemned, and you'll realize it's based on antiquated technology that now might be solved. Like for example, people say this with the internet. Oh, the internet's bad, and people are on their phones all the time instead of talking to other people. But what is one of the primary things they use those things for? Oh, to communicate with people. And now, in a broader, better way than ever before, objectively, you can talk to people all around the planet. Anywhere in the world, rather than just restricting it to the nearness postulate, saying, placing undue emphasis and value on people around you just because they're physically around you, and a closer geographical environment basis. So, would you rather interact with potentially anybody around the whole planet, or would you rather interact with only the people in your immediate local environment just because, they're there? Because you didn't have the technology to do otherwise before. So I'm not glorifying it, I'm just looking at the objective net positive that you have more options, and I'm looking at the fact that it's only glorified, nearness postulate is only glorified because historically you didn't have that choice, and now you do, and so it's only condemned because of this archaic notion of the past. So, it's not the fault of technology, it's the fault of how you use it, even then, if you want to say that. So what other notions do we have here? It's a simple fact of technology from the perspective of most things, right, could be solved or already solved from that. Like, for example, even being gay, like, let's say a historical reason for criticizing that would be if we allow one person to be gay in society, hypothetically, then everybody might be, and then we'll go extinct because we won't have kids anymore. And aside from, having sex with the other sex just to do that, which might be difficult to get people to do, the real reason then is, okay, now we have artificial insemination and all these other ways of doing it, and so therefore it wouldn't be at least as much of a concern. It might still cause problems and be difficult to sustain society just based on that, but right, a lot of the reasons why things are condemned might no longer be useful or necessary. So they were never objectively good or bad, they were just useful or not useful, and now with technology they might no longer be those things. So you realize that defines it completely. In other words, morality is defined by technology. Like, abortions might have been condemned in the past, but now that they're easier and safer to do, now they might not be so condemned because it's fine. Like, it might have posed other problems, it might have been unsuccessful a lot more. Or, not might have, it definitely was unsuccessful more. You had to use a wire coat hanger, no wire coat hangers ever. I forget if that's even what that line is about. In Mommy Dearest, no wire coat hanger, she gets mad that you have any in the house because it reminds her of an abortion or something. I don't know if that's actually what it was. I forgot. But yeah, there's these like old school antiquated notions that people insist upon blindly without even defining for themselves. This is like the whole concept of the inherent base that I talk about. Define something from an objective inherent perspective. So take away all your preconceived notions and everything and just look at it objectively. Like, you're a caveman who was born in the middle of the jungle and now you're looking at it this way. And why does it make sense? Justify it from that perspective, not just, it is just because it is, and we're just used to it, and that's how society does it, and of course, let's just insist upon it. That's the one thing I would always do. I had a specialty at this, right? My whole debate format and stuff. I would pose sort of things, takes or ideas, and the response to them would be lacking in a rebuttal. They would say, well, of course, that's just crazy, or, there would be some blank, vacant rebuttal that they wouldn't actually respond to or address what I'm saying, right? They would just insist upon their own perspective or ridicule it or something, but nothing that actually said anything, that had any substance to it. So that's what can be so surprising, is that you get to basically kind of question it a little bit here.